Welcome to episode 19 of Divine Superconductor Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn, and today I'm speaking with Lance Roll, otherwise known as the Flavor Chef. So this episode is all about bone broth. It's a great introduction if you're coming from a vegan or a vegetarian lifestyle, or just a standard American diet and you've never had beef broth or chicken broth from healthy animals. And healthy animals is really the key. We go into that a little bit in this episode because you can buy broth at your grocery store, Sprouts, Costco, in the little packages, but something that's sitting like that at room temperature is not good. The Flavor Chef is mailed to you frozen, and then you thaw it out as you use them. So it's a lot fresher, the nutrients are intact, and there's no questionable preservatives that are added to it. All right, we are here with Lance Roll, the Flavor Chef. Welcome to the show, Lance.
Yeah, Matt, great to be with you today. Everything is looking good.
Awesome. Yeah, really stoked to connect with you. I think I found you about 4 or 5 years ago, and I've gone back and forth trying all sorts of crazy diets. I think like a lot of us have, and
Sure.
I haven't been dealing with the chronic intense condition, luckily. So I think that gave me kind of the freedom to experiment with fruitarianism and veganism and vegetarianism. But I've always come back to animal foods, and not just animal products, but broth and meat. And I find that works really well for me. So
Yeah.
really grateful to have found your work and
Sure.
what you share.
Yeah, well, we've learned, and you've found out for yourself that we're all biologically, genetically unique. So what may work for you, may not work for me. And so I always tell people, look, when you're going into diets and things, try not to be too lopsided. Try to have a fair hand at it because my wife eats completely different the way I do, and she has a slight body, and I'm a big husky guy, and I'm an earthy guy, so I like my meat and protein, and and everyone's different. So I always tell people the best clue is what's working for you. Do you have energy? Do you feel good? Do you sleep good? Are you happy? Do you feel satiated after you're done eating? Are you constantly going after things? Then you got to look at something. Do you have gastrointestinal conditions that are saying you, hey, and sometimes you can just do it. You can do it intuitively. You just feel. If I go to McDonald's, I'm like, I'm not going to eat that. So anyway.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, for me, the protein piece has been so huge. I just had Dr. Cass Ingram on the show, and we went deep into protein. And
Yeah.
I think that's the missing factor for a lot of people, even people that are eating meat. And I remember in my nutrition class, they have the requirements 1 gram up to 2 grams per kilograms of body weight.
Sure.
But I was talking to Josh yesterday, and he was saying some of his clients sometimes need, Josh Rubin's, 250, or, it's
Yeah.
so variable how many grams of protein we each need. And I feel effect on my nervous system stress wise when I get a sufficient amount.
Sure. And I think, the other part of it is absorption. If we swallow a 20-ounce steak and we don't chew it, there's a good chance we're not going to get much protein from that steak, no matter how much it contains. So we just ask people right from the beginning in a health questionnaire, like how are you doing? How is this eating thing working for you? Are you under stress driving in the car, shoving down a burger, and swallowing it in 4 bites? May not necessarily give you everything it says is in there. So there's so many factors to overall health, and the cells need protein, fat, and carbohydrates. So we've found that the diets that typically eliminate one of those 3, or say one is more important than the other, tend to whack out most people that we're dealing with. And Price went around. We were talking about bone broth and where that came from. And Weston A. Price was a dentist in the 30s who went around studying cultures, and thankfully for us, he studied health, not disease. And he found in those cultures around the globe, including the Swiss Alps cultures in there, to equatorial cultures, to Arctic cultures, all around the globe, basically indigenous cultures, finding out what they did right or how they ate. And he found that when they ate their indigenous diets, they were very healthy. Many of the cultures didn't have words for words for cancer and heart disease and things like that because they just weren't in existence. The work of Weston A. Price, by the way, the WAPF organization is available to everyone online and also through Price Pottinger, which I know we talked a little bit before the show about Ray Peat and Josh Rubin, and these guys are all heavily influenced by some of their work. And the basic comes down to whole food. Are you eating whole organic food? But to wrap it around, because we're talking about bone broth today and gelatin and things like that, Price did find that a lot of cultures simmered animal bones, carcasses, and skin, and things they couldn't necessarily make palatable to eat, to extract the nutrients through simmering and in good quality water. And they found that those nutrients derived from the bones and ligaments and things they couldn't chew really helped their overall health. So that's where bone broth kind of came from back. And I mean, from antiquity, from the days of Hippocrates and back 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, however you do the math. And, that's just a place where we get the nutrition from the bone broth. So,
That was an awesome explanation. Yeah, and it makes sense just logically that we wouldn't just eat the muscle meat and then waste the rest of the animal. Would
sure.
utilize all of it. And
Yeah,
um,
and a lot of the cultural, we could talk a little bit about the cultural background, and that was the mindset. The mindset was, hey, we're people who revere the source of the food that they had. They revered the relationships they had in their community. There was generally, a caregiver who was, preparing the food that the hunters would gather, or the hunters would hunt or gather, and there was reverence for the whole animal. And so that's where the bones and the skin and things that they couldn't necessarily digest were used. Skins were used for, hides of bigger animals were used for keeping warm and for clothes and all these different things. So, and I think intuitively, a lot of the cultures knew that they were getting a bunch of the stuff they needed from those animals. Around the equator where there's lots of sea, they ate a lot of fish. You know, cultures up in the north in the polar region, they ate mostly fat and animals, and the only vegetation they had was out of their stomachs of killed animals, the animals they had killed. So um, just a lot of it is intuitive, but that's definitely some of the background of wanting to really revere and utilize everything that was given to the culture and to the people. So
that's awesome. Yeah, and I think you said the key word is reverence because I think a lot of the ethical vegans or even vegetarians, that using the whole animal that changes the whole picture because you're respecting the process.
yeah, and picture as well too. When we're talking with health and wellness, we're not talking about we're not talking about Chick-fil-A here. We're not talking about mass-produced, CAFO raised animals. We're talking about products, especially for the bone for us at bonebroth.com and for the Flavor Chef. I mean, we particularly went out and sourced humanely raised, non-genetically, non-GMO verified, certified organic, pasture raised when it comes to the cattle. There's really only beef and chicken that we do. So, but those would be the qualities that were inherent in food prior to World War I. They were all that way. There was no industrial farming at that point in terms of animal husbandry. So, I mean, maybe it was a little bit here and there, family farms and things to feed communities, but nothing like the level we have today that processed food went in to destroy. So, that's an
Yeah.
important line in the sand for our audience is, especially if we get into talking about how to make bone broth and how you make a quality bone broth. But that's a line in the sand. And then, of course, there was water, which we mentioned earlier as well, in terms of you and I talking before the show. And what's the quality of the water? I mean, bone broth is mostly water. So again, at bonebroth.com and the Flavor Chef, we are the only bone broth on the planet till this very moment that uses spring water, not filtered water, not reverse osmosis water, not water. Thank God. I mean, look at your ingredients, man. If it says water, be aware, buyer beware. You can write filtered water. You could write spring water. You could write whatever your water source is on that label. If they say water, that means it comes out of the tap. That means it comes from a municipal system. And at that point, have at it, because that's just a system that is taxed, to say the least. So anyway, we use spring water, and that's a key ingredient. So that's an important uh, dividing line for us. Again, a line in the sand.
That's awesome. And where's the spring water from?
We get it from Palomar Mountain. So
Oh,
Palomar Mountain
cool.
Spring, yeah, Palomar Mountain. It makes it fairly local. It's about an hour away. The trucks literally drive down in a stainless steel truck. They pull it from the mountain, from their spring up there. It goes through UV light, which is required for all potable water systems at the minimum, and that's the minimum it gets treated with, and then it goes into our tanks, and from our tanks pumps into our kettles. So there's not even bottles, water bottles out there getting
Wasted.
sunlight
Yeah.
on them, and estrogens and all that other stuff.
I love it. That's so funny. That's full circle, because I used to actually go with my jugs, and I was super intense, fill up spring water, spring water hunter. And I flooded my car a few times up in Palomar. Fun times.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. That's an important, again, another important quality of digestion and assimilation absorption is your hydration. Your body needs water. A typical recommendation would be about half your weight in ounces a day. So if you weigh 200, you do 100 ounces of water. And, again, when it comes, and I just learned as well that it has to be water, that when it includes bone broth or tea or coffee or something like that. Well, coffee would be a different topic, but things that you may seem, oh, this is vitamin water. It forces the water to go through the digestive tract rather than directly assimilated. So that's a key difference that I just learned about why my tea doesn't count towards my water, or why cucumbers don't count towards my water consumption. But so I've been working on my own self, trying to drink my amount of water every day and keep myself hydrated.
That's a good point. Yeah, I'm a big fan of distilled. I have a little e-course on my website, and I think the TDS is really something people should measure. And you can get them on eBay, like $15, a little total dissolved solid meter, and just see how many minerals are in the water, because that's important. But yeah, I'm a big fan. If the spring's low TDS, like under 100, ideally, I'm all about it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know much about that. Again, I know distilled water is just boiled water or whatever, or
Mhm.
evaporated steam or something.
It's like a diet wars with water. People get all emotional. What's the best? And it's funny.
Sure. Well, like I said, with our bone broth, the best we can do is spring water, and you just buyer beware. Just check the label, see what they're
Yeah.
using. And even filters are so subjective.
Hmm.
As a health professional once told me, "Hey, Lance, they make Coke and Pepsi with triple filtered water." So and so who knows what the filter system is, and some of these larger production scale companies, if it's been changed, if it's actually filtering out the things, because filters are designed for different things, and most of them cannot take out medical waste. So you're talking about uh, drugs that are in the system. They've shown Viagra and these type of drugs that are all being peed out into the system, and they're making it through to your water, to your tap water. So,
Some
just
guys might like that, right? No, I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
well, yeah, you just got to be careful. We don't want it in our bone broth, that's for sure, because there's lots of other stuff in there, including antibiotics and
Yeah.
hormones and whatnot. So,
Viagra infused bone broth.
yeah,
That's
Viagra is infused, but you don't need Viagra if you're drinking bone broth. We can talk about that too, for sure.
um, yeah, let's do it. But have you heard of Joel Salatin of Polyface Farms? I really like his work, because you were talking about
Absolutely.
grass-fed.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Joel's amazing. He's part of the slow food movement, and really has brought a lot of awareness to farming, biodynamic farming, and just being aware of how the land is being used, and um, you know the importance of pasture raised animals and meats and things you're using, the method that they raise them, and the method that they slaughter, and everything else. So right from seed to us, to the table. So
Yeah, I love the way he describes it. It's like kind of a spiritual explanation of how the grass, collects the solar energy, and then the cows convert it. And I was watching a video yesterday where he was talking about the electric fences, and how that these new innovations that his great grandfather would have given an arm and a leg for help the farmers a lot. Like just the electric fences alone make farming so much easier. Thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like you said, you are what you eat, but I say you are what you eat. More importantly, you are what you absorb. But within all that is you are whatever that animal ate. So
Mhm.
if the animal's eating corn, GMO corn, and being stuffed with antibiotics to get to market to get to 1,000 pounds by 1 year, then and also the quality of the life of the animal. So it's all important. And Joel Salatin talks all about that at Polyface Farm. So really cool stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
and
on the same page.
definitely, yeah. And going back to what you were saying about Weston A. Price too, I grew up. I remember in junior high school, one of my buddies had the jaw alignment contraption. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like so nerdy. It looks, it's
Yeah, sure.
all the, and I just
No,
saw it,
yeah,
cavities, and it's crazy.
right. Because the what happened when what happened with what Price discovered was that when societies were introduced to the Western diet, to the SAD, Standard American Diet, the four white devils: sugar, salt, flour, and sugar, salt,
And
white
dairy, right?
flour,
Pasteurized
and
dairy.
pasteurized dairy. Exactly. When they went from their raw milk and all those, and their local salt and their heirloom grains, that they're within one generation, um, the facial structure went crazy. And he shows, the book it's called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. That was the book that he produced, and it's one of the books that most, at least in our backgrounds, we've read or at least perused. And it's not that hard to read. It's a good read, and that's where Price got his information, or presents his information to people to digest. But it is exactly physical degeneration. I know, um, some of the people I've been listening to lately. They're talking about, the fact that we have the most doctors ever, the most well trained people, but we have the sickest society. We have the biggest health insurance costs anywhere in the world, but we can't seem to figure out how to help people stay healthy. It's rather just managed care is all it is. And
Yeah.
sometimes they throw the key away. They say, "Hey, all right, well, good luck. Here you go. Stick you in the system and hope for the best." Where something like bone broth and having a decent protocol in your eating could really change the way you look and feel. I mean, bone broth's been proven to be part of a protocol, as we like to say, but it really just makes sense. It improves your digestive tract. Everyone always asks, "What's the main benefit of bone broth?" And the benefit is first of all, the benefit is it's food. It's not a supplement. It's not been reduced. It's not been dehydrated, or not some dehydration isn't so bad, but it's not been made into. There's some people out there saying bone broth powder is the same. I would disagree, and we can talk about that too. But for now, we say that gut health is pretty much the importance. Food is biologically and molecularly available to the body immediately, because that's what you recognize in your digestive tract. And then the gelatin, the bioavailable gelatin and collagen, is what actually goes in and heals and seals the gut. So if you're suffering from leaky gut or any other gut inflammation issues, the broth tends to soothe the whole thing. And of course, a warm cup of broth's been used for centuries to care for the infirmed, and it helps them feel better. So we use love as the ultimate spice at the Flavor Chef, and we kettle cook with love. And when you put all that good energy into it, start with good water, use organic bones, and 100% organic everything, you come out with a product that people can actually drink. And that's the number one testimony we get, is an amazingly delicious bone broth that we have. So it's got to be
I
delicious
can
too.
definitely I can attest to that. Yours is the best tasting. I love it. Yeah. And it was funny yesterday, just I've been doing so many interviews and talking a lot, and I was starting to lose my voice. And so all I did was double my intake of bone broth, and it took a few other herbal sprays and stuff, but I woke up feeling brand new. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. They say bone broth can, the old South American proverb quoted in Nourishing Traditions, which was produced by the Weston A. Price Foundation back in 2000, 2001. The South American proverb is good broth will resurrect the dead. You know, Broth itself, I mean, good luck if you're paying $2 for a quart on bone broth, and they call it bone broth because it is what you are, what you eat, you get what you pay for. Certain rules in society, we just cannot break the rules. You can't walk away from the store. Yeah, I just saved $100 on groceries, and you got all this crap in your thing, and I just sad when you see people checking out. Sometimes it's like, really, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it should be illegal to sell Fruit Loops to kids. In my opinion.
I'm in agreement with you. Yeah. And I really like the affordability of the Flavor Chef too. Cause
Thank you.
I was just I was at a natural food store a few months ago in LA, and it was like $20 for just this little jar. And, it was in glass, but
That was
it,
Air One, probably.
yeah, I think, yeah, it was their line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a couple.
Yeah.
They have a very expensive bone broth base, so we actually available in Air One
Oh, cool.
in LA, and we're available at many other independent natural food stores around Southern California. But yeah, the quality over. We have a good I mean the quality of our bone broth for the price makes it pretty much the best available you can get. Of course, I'm touting my own, but like you said, we've tried others, and we can see the difference. So again, we're just sticking to tradition, man. We're sticking to a
Yeah.
low, slow simmer. We go 18 hours on the chicken. We go 24 hours on the beef bones. The beef bones are first roasted in the oven as well. The chicken bones are not, but the beef bones are roasted for flavor, and it kind of sets the bones, and then you simmer low and slow, which again was traditional. One reason it was just the easiest way to do it, but also because it tends to draw the nutrients out slowly and keeps them most intact. And we're talking about amino acids, minerals, uh, and because we use a full component of vegetables, we have electrolytes and very low salt as well in our broth. So all those things coming out from a traditionally simmered bone broth, when you compare it to high processed, uh, let's just call it crap, like bone broth protein powders, and I don't have a lot to say about them that are good, except that they're not bone broth. I don't know much about what they can do for you or not, but they say they are because that's what they want to sell, but they really aren't, because bone broth itself is a food that you buy in the food section, and for ours in the frozen section of the store, because we have a perishable product. And the perishability of a product is also something that tells you its nature as well. If a product can sit on the shelf for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, or it's going to be good ad infinitum, which some of these products are, we put a 2-year shelf life on it, but it can go longer. Well, first of all, I say broth is good for you, promotes a healthier you, but you have to drink it to do that.
Yeah.
And walking on the beach and sticking your feet on the earth and sucking up all the air up in Idlewild in the nice trees is only good if you go out and do it. If you're stuck in a house in front of a computer all day, I'm not sure it's going to help you to be in those beautiful trees. Probably doesn't.
Well, well said. No,
Sure.
yeah. Yeah, we do our best, people at work. I always recommend, because my first podcast interview was with an air expert, and I always say keep the windows open and try to bring nature into your home as much as possible. But as you eloquently put it, you have to go out there. That's the only way,
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah.
you get a lot of people walking around with a lot of knowledge, and you kind of go, well, all right, that's great. Now, what are you going to do about it?
Mhm.
Um, until I jumped in the ocean. Well, I've been jumping in the ocean my whole life, but when I do get in the ocean, man, it just is amazing. And there's something about the ion exchange at the foot of the ocean. This is way off bone broth, by the way, folks, but we're having
That's
a good
fine.
time giving you some health tips that you may or may not want to hear, but at least if we give them to you, you have an opportunity to say, hey, you know what? I think I'll go stick my feet on the earth, barefoot, connected. And I mean, there's now studies proving that alone can be marginally improve your health with free. Just, get a good night's sleep. Free. You know, free.
Well,
It's one of the
well
best.
said.
God. Yeah.
No, well said. My favorite place to ground is on the wet sand on the beach. Even if you don't go in the water, just watching the sunset or whatever with your feet in the wet sand. That's changed my life. I did that.
Absolutely. Nice. Yeah. And there's several things happening there. And one of them is like the ion exchange. The other one is you're there, you're experiencing it. You've decided to lift everything else behind you, and you get to the ocean, you turn around and there's everything behind you. And then you look out and you go, there's an ocean of possibilities. The waves keep coming. I went through a little bit of some challenging times last year, and that was a solace for me to just feel and say, you know what, yeah, you know what, I don't, then I stopped listening to news, stop listening to all the stuff because I can't do anything about it. The news I need to know is running around my head, and my family and my local relationships and things I can affect, mostly within. So there you go.
Well said, man. I love that. Yeah, I've experimented with so many nootropics and herbs and devices and all this stuff, but I found nothing works as good as nature to on my mind, calming and yeah.
Amen to that.
Yeah, it's amazing. And all those things are help, but they're supplemental. They're after you have that foundation for sure.
Sure. Yep.
Um, so I, I'm really curious, what is the difference between broth and gelatin and collagen? You touched on it a little bit. I put collagen in my coffee, and I think the source matters. Like the collagen from India is a lot better than the collagen from elsewhere, from what I've read. But I, from it's my understanding that proteins act differently in water than they do when they're dehydrated, and so you can try to rehydrate the proteins and bring it back to life or whatever. But it's kind of like spring water, right? I mean, you're not going to get 100% there. You might get part of the way, but not all the way.
Yeah, I think, again, for me and my scientific nature is, the old adage is simple. Food is medicine. Hippocrates said, let your food be your medicine, let your medicine be your food. So that's basic structure step number one. So when we're talking about gelatin and collagen that comes from a food, you're looking at bioavailability. So the gelatin is, again, the cooked. I think it's the cooked form of collagen, something to this effect. But you'll notice it in your product, in your bone broth product, especially ours. You'll see if you take ours out of sometimes directly out of the package, which I've noticed lately. I can open up a beef broth of ours and it'll be gelatinous. But generally, we always give them a little pass. Heat it once gently. You don't need to boil it. You bring it to a brief simmer, put it in a glass jar, and see what it looks like the next day after it chills sufficiently. If it's still liquid, then then it's probably good for you. It's got some beneficial parts to it, but the gel is what causes it to be like Jello like. So gelatin basically. So yeah, the gelatin we had as kids was typically, what was its source? I don't know. The collagen peptides or collagen supplements you're taking. Yeah, just make sure they're from a grass fed, hopefully organic, or at least grass fed, grass finished source. And generally, from what I understand, they come from the hides. The collagen is mostly in the hides of the animals. And again, I do not know the process of how they extract it and get it to a powder that you can toss into your uh, tea or coffee or water or smoothie. But again, and again, let's just let let the person understand what's happening in their body and determine if it's working for them or not. Some people I've heard have adverse reaction to collagen because they're sensitive to certain byproducts from making the collagen that way. So the broths you might be drinking, that's the litmus test. Take
Yeah.
the broth out of the box if it's in a box, and let's just put that out there too. Box brands such as Kettle and Fire or Pacific Bone Broth, those broths, to get them to their 2 year plus shelf life, have to be sterilized. So if you're sterile, you're basically not going to get anyone pregnant because your sperm doesn't work. It's not working. You're sterilized. So again, to get sterilized, that's about 295 degrees, uh,
Wow.
and then it's packed into those boxes, which are lined with polyethylene, supposedly the good plastic, and that's right over the aluminum foil to keep it waterproof. And then beyond that is paper, but of course the broth doesn't actually hit the paper because the plastic, polyethylene, and the foil, the aluminum foil, at 295 degrees keeps it, what they call, I forget, the aseptic. So a sterile environment. So it's completely been sterilized. There's absolutely nothing in it that could hurt you. I don't know if there's anything that can help you. They run it through a computer lab to tell you that there is. and then they I don't know if it's ever been tested in a real lab like ours is. We send ours out to the lab. A food product goes out, and they say, yeah, this is what's in it, and this is what's not in it. So there's a lot of deceptive marketing out there, in my opinion. So those are, two brands you could look at. And so if you're making your own broth or you're buying a broth, try to buy fresh broth. There's a couple other brands out there that are out there, and they have decent products that are apparently made the way they are. I can't speak to them because I don't know them, but hopefully they are.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I was at Costco, I think 4 months
Yeah,
ago or so, and
Costco.
I saw those boxed broth, and that was the first time I'd ever even heard of boxed broth, and I was like, "This is at room temperature. This can't be good." And it was just like
Yeah,
bulk, and it was so cheap.
2 year shelf life. Yeah, they had a frozen brand there too. I have no idea how the heck they got 40 ounces or something to $9.99. Think about the chain. The other thing is the price. The chain going backwards. Everyone made a profit.
Yeah,
The bottle company made a profit selling them the bottle. The broth company's making a profit. Costco's making a small profit, and everyone's profiting at $9.99, except for potentially the person drinking it because they think they're getting something, but maybe it's working as a placebo. I don't know. It was really high salt. Be careful, buyer beware. That's all. Just read labels and understand the source and maybe look into it. You can
yeah.
our websites are transparent. We have all the sources. You can go to Mary's Chicken, see what they feed the chickens. You can go to Homegrown Meat, see what they feed the cattle. You can go to we use Better Life Produce in LA, 100% organic produce company. We use, I forget, apple cider vinegar. It's 100% organic. Our best, we use UNFI to get cider vinegar and bay leaves and peppercorns. But when we're certified organic, that means you go through an audit process every year. The auditor comes out and he looks at the whole system. He looks at the organic system plan, the OSP. He looks at all your receipts. He looks at how much broth you sold versus how much broth you say you made. And 100% of that has to add up. When you have a company that doesn't go through that, and just puts organic on their label, they can pay to write the word organic on there. They should be held accountable for it, but potentially it could be or not be. They can
That's
tell you whatever you
incredible.
want. A used car salesman can tell you anything you want about the car. As long as he gets the sale, he's happy.
Yeah, I've
And
been
I've
the
gotten
victim
burned
of
by
that.
used cars. I'm not telling you. I'm not saying that they are used car salesmen, but just check it out. That's all. Be honest with
Yeah.
yourself and look at it. And if you like it and it's good, then it's the right price, fits your budget, then hey, have at it.
I encourage my listeners to pay more for quality, because especially when it's your body, if you try to get a deal, like shopping at Costco is your primary source of food, is probably not a good idea. Because
Yeah, and again, they brought in a lot of organic stuff.
yeah.
They brought in organic foods. They have a lot of different organic things, and certain things you might be able to get a deal. I got organic cacao there. Native forest or whatever it's called, and I think it's all the quality we like to buy online. It's fair trade certified. It's GF. It's gluten free. It's certified organic, which means they had to go through the audit too. And again, they'll
Yeah.
just give you a better deal on it, and then you're drinking that cacao. But yeah, I mean, if you're my son asked me a couple of years ago. He said, "Daddy, do people really eat dinner from AM PM?" I'm like, "Yeah, sadly they do. They get $3 for two pork sandwiches or whatever they get there." And gosh, they probably picking up their cigarettes and their Diet Coke at the same time. So
Yeah, it seems like people on the rat race, just in fight or flight, it's like they don't know that changing that can get them out of the fight or flight. It's interesting.
absolutely. Yeah, we and again, I went organic personally about 10 years ago, and the health, we don't even want to pay for health insurance, but we have to. But it's just
Mhm.
like we don't go to the doctor. I've had, I don't know, I got to go just get something out of my health insurance. But yeah, that's Dr. Diet, and if you can get Dr. Diet right, he'll probably help a lot of other parts of you out as well. But back to the quality issue and the gelatin. We were on the gelatin, and that's one of the main benefits. Again, that's going to heal and seal the gut. It's going to help support anything that the animals were supporting, the gelatin helps support your joints, helps support your skin, can help grow your nails, hair, can reconstruct those things. If you're having skin issues, potentially Hippocrates also stated that 80 that the disease begins in the gut. So we're healing that gut lining with bone broth. We recommend, again, whatever your clinician recommends, whatever your body tells you you can afford to have, whatever then we go against your financial wherewithal at that point as well. And where you weighing your health out, your health versus your wealth. And they say sometimes health is the new wealth. And ask anyone who's in a bed with no hair and fighting for their life.
Yeah.
So that it's a scary situation, but it can be mitigated through proper preparation. Plan preparation, and that preparation would be say, hey, meeting with my first health coach client this week, and we're just talking about the basics, just getting into a plan. And I'm not going to go, oh, buy my bone broth. Well, let's see what she's doing first with the rest of her life, and then if bone broth's appropriate, we'll offer them to, hey, maybe add this to your life. Drink 8 ounces in the morning, see how you feel. Those kind of things. So really, that's how bone broth works to support those things. It's an immune builder as well. Because again, once we start healing the gut, the immune system's 80% in the digestive tract. So you start healing the digestive tract, you empower the immune system to be stronger. When you raise your immune system, you're naturally going to fight off diseases, viruses, and things better from within, and you'll fight those things that are happening with your stuff. And one of the other things too, one benefit that I always mention that's never mentioned really is synergy. And that was one of my original 10 back in 2012 when we started the company. When we started selling bone, I shouldn't say, in 2008, we started the company. We got bonebroth.com. And then I didn't sell broth publicly until 2012. And somebody asked me, were you the original? I was the original, even though other people might say they were. I was. I was before anyone in frozen in retail in San Diego in April of 2012 with my food license from the California Department of Public Health to sell food, and my licensed kitchen and everything else we had at that point to get it to market. So, but during that time, I came up with synergy, meaning that bone broth will be part of the protocol. It'll help tie things together that you're doing, proper hydration, things we touched on, walking on the beach, proper nutrition for your body type, for whatever your needs are, and your mental, emotional state, and relationships. What's happening in those things that's going on in your life. All things we might look at. So that's the way it works. And then when you start drinking bone broth, yeah, I think I'll skip the Diet Coke today. I'll replace it with water. And the next thing you know, you've kind of synergizing the rest of your health protocol. And it's good. It makes you feel good. It fills you up nice. And it does actually have a strengthening, according to Kayla Daniel and Nourishing Broth, it does maybe help your libido a little bit. So
Yeah, you don't need Viagra in the water.
no, you don't, and you're getting the natural collagen, gelatins. It's all joints and tissues. So there you go.
No, that was great, Lance. I appreciate all that info. And
Sure.
one of my mentors, Dr. Ray Pete, he's obsessed with gelatin, and he kind of lives on gelatinous broths every day. And he really got me amped up for it, even when I was vegetarian, and that was kind of part of my transition.
Yeah.
Um, and he talks a lot about the inflammatory amino acids, tryptophan and cysteine, that are in the muscle meat, and those suppress the metabolism and the thyroid gland. And glycine, proline, all of these ones in bone broth are exactly the opposite, complementary, and so they're anti-stress, pro-thyroid. And I think a lot of those benefits you just mentioned, like joints, hair, skin, etc., that's from that. You're getting the missing amino acids that you haven't been getting probably your
Yeah.
entire life.
Those are considered essential amino acids, meaning you have to get them from your diet. So
Mhm.
also you have in that you have glucosamine, hyaluronic acid. Those are all joint supporters as well. You got major minerals, magnesium, calcium, and again we could talk about calcium. Calcium absorption is tough in any way, and you need magnesium to do it. But the bone broths themselves are not highly rich in calcium, but because they have a supportive, because everything is needs to be looked at whole in the whole, isolated proteins, isolated minerals, and that's what Ray Pete talks about too, is bringing everything together at once, so your body again recognizes it and says, yeah, I can utilize all these glycine, proline, hydroxyproline, and the also I think it's glycine is also really helpful in detoxification.
Mhm.
So one of the amino acids in bone broth helps you to detoxify the toxins in your liver and in your body. So you start to detoxify your body, and well, lo and behold, you might go through a moment or two when you're like, "Wow, what the heck's coming out of me?" But then you're like, "Oh, I feel better. I'm feeling more clear-headed. Getting rid of the brain fog and things like that." So, but part of it,
Yeah,
yeah, good stuff.
yeah. I'm glad you brought up detox because if you look up glycine and GABA, that amino acid, there's a huge relationship and how it affects sleep and benefits sleep. And then
Sure.
glycine and glyphosate too. That's another one. So just glycine alone, that little piece of bone broth, it's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's there in pretty good portions. So there's other things you can get glycine from as well, but in terms of the bone broth, we have a real lot of it in there, and it's good for you to be working with that stuff. I think the um, when we're talking about those things as well, we have again we have this general support for your system.
Mhm.
It's part of the structure. And when you're building the structure, rebuilding the foundation, that's where you'll find you're able to move forward in areas of your life you may not have been able to move forward in before.
Well said. Yeah, when you lower stress, I mean that improves everything.
Yeah.
You could think clear, and I'm really
Lord.
curious about on the package. You said put it in glass jars, and so can you just describe that protocol? Because I have a ton of your broths in my freezer. I have a chest freezer filled with local meat, and is that just with the one that you're using? You recommend? Because I probably do a
Yeah,
half
just the
bag at
one
a
you're
time.
using. Yeah,
Okay.
so here
Yeah.
again, it's a good point to bring up. We talked a little bit about how the boxes are hot fills. A lot of
Yeah.
the packaging out there with food like that are hot fills. Hot fills meaning they take it from heat to the plastic and then into some sort of chiller to get it to either shrink wrap or whatever to get it to a point that it's able to be like someone was introducing me to what they not cryovac um, sous vide, which is some kind of French way to put stuff in water and boil it in plastic, and then it preserves it for a long time. And they use a lot of that in those stores like Applebee's and these chain restaurants where they just basically open packages and heat your food up for you. Someone
Nice.
recently told me about that because they worked at one of them. They were like, "Yeah, all they do in these places." He was getting all mad. I'm like, "Well, just don't eat there, dude. Don't support them. Put your money where you want it to go." But what we do again for this podcast and for the truth, bonebroth.com, the Flavor Chef Inc. We've always packed our bone broth 49 degrees or less. So we have a
Wow.
BPA free certified letter from the manufacturers that our plastic is BPA free. When we're talking about plastic leaching, because it always comes up, why don't you use glass? Well, the main, again, we pack at 49 degrees. We have a constantly rotating inventory, so it's never long in free frozen storage. And then when people take it home, they drink it immediately. So we do say, yeah, once you can get it out of plastic, you take the pouch. We recommend slicing it open or cutting it open or pulling it open and uh, pouring it into a pot, bringing it to a simmer. And then a simmer, I noticed, I said a simmer, about 165. And then you're going to, drink what you need, add salt, because we don't have any salt in our product. Add your salt, preferably a good Himalaya. We use real salt. That's the one we
Mm.
use in the beef broth. Real brand is Redmond Real Salt from Utah, and that's the one I use at home. But there's other good salts out there from Hawaii, from Himalaya, whatever. But again, and then put it in a glass jar. So the other side of that coin is, well, why didn't we do that to begin with? Well, again, we did some environmental studies and found out that glass is actually worse for the environment than plastic because it's so much bigger, it's so much bulkier. When we're selling, $1 million worth of bone broth a year or so thereabouts, we don't have room for the storage of the bottles, and then you have breakage. and all these other things, and cost. The brand that's our competition in glass bottles is about $18 for 20 ounces. So most people can't stomach that. I know I couldn't stomach that. So that's why we recommend the glass after you open the package. And generally, you'll keep it frozen until you need it, put it in the fridge, and then defrost it. And if you can successfully leave it in the fridge, defrost it for 7 to 10 days, because it takes 3 or 4 days to fully defrost anyway. The way the temperature works, if your product doesn't hit 45 degrees, it'll basically stay good for almost 2 weeks. But again, then you're not drinking it. So
Yeah, yeah.
only good for you when you drink it. when you,
That was an awesome. Yeah. So bring it to a simmer, 165 Fahrenheit. If you boil it, does it modify the amino acids or the other
you know,
or the
the,
others?
the boiling of bone broth doesn't defeat the purpose, truthfully. But what it could do is raise histamine.
Mm,
If you do the high heat, if you're sensitive to histamine, if you have a histamine reaction, you can potentially do that. And again, from my experience over all these years, all these interviews, people calling me on the phone, dietitians, breast cancer ministries that minister to minister to people going through breast cancer, all these different things. Uh, the histamine issue comes up. But again, we use the low, slow simmer. We find most people can drink our bone broth without any problems at all. So they don't have those. And there's certainly no. There's a little bit of a glutamate issue, potentially
mm,
from high heat as well, when the glutamine converts to glutamate, and
mm.
that's the one we don't want. We want glutamine, but we don't want glutamate, monosodium glutamate. So you could say there's no glutamate added, but if you use a high heat process, heat to 295 degrees, kettle and fire. I'm just talking quick. You might come up with more glutamate in your product. So but anyway, there's an issue there. So the other thing you did mention glyphosate. Now glyphosate is our product's been tested. Glyphosate's the main chemical in Roundup, and of course there's lots of talk out there on the GMO issue, and of course Monsanto and their GMO Roundup and their GMO Roundup safe seeds and everything else, and all this shit being put on the food that people are eating. No, sorry for the no slip of the tongue. It's just crazy what they're doing to us.
This will be
And
explicit now. That's okay. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, yeah, you know. So yeah, but I want to say this publicly as well. We had a company. We had a gal. Her name was Pam. I'll just give her her first name. She sells and talks to cancer doctors all the time. She found the product she was using. She did not tell me which one it was. She did say it was one of our competitors to be positive for glyphosate. So,
Wow.
in other words, somewhere in the chain, they got something in there that contained glyphosate. It didn't make it through, whether it was the water or the process or the bones. I'm not sure. She didn't tell me. She did buy our product, send the product to the testing lab that she sent the other product to, got it tested by a glyphosate testing lab, and our chicken bone broth came up negative for glyphosate. We're assuming beef broth is negative as well. Everything in the bones are even cleaner than the chicken bones, so to speak, because they're just raised on grass, and they're certified organic as well. So that said, we have no glyphosate in our product, and again, the studies are now showing that some of the gluten issues might be related to the glyphosate in the wheat rather than the gluten, and all these autoimmune conditions, which are now at the highest peak in history. We're talking about Hashimoto's, cancer. Gosh, there's so many of them out there now. Leaky gut. What are some of the other autoimmune conditions are slipping my mind? Foggy brain. Just kidding.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they're saying it's gonna come back to the Roundup that's been sprayed on everything, and supposedly kill all the bugs, which we actually need for
Yeah.
survival. We need those
Yeah.
bugs. We need those bees, or we're not going to make it. So
Yeah.
those bugs are part of the food chain, by the way.
Yeah, I just had a microbiologist on who we were talking about digging your hands in the dirt, and I like to do that when I'm hiking in the forest, especially
Absolutely.
high elevation. Just get inoculated. I'm really glad you brought all that up, and I've heard glyphosate's airborne. So to me, that's one toxin that's impossible to avoid because it's just everywhere. But I think bone broth is an excellent way to mitigate it with the glycine in there. So
Absolutely. And like I said, our product was tested, lab tested, for a couple of $100, to send a pouch in, and she did it a few times and
Mm-hmm.
came back negative. So we have,
Awesome.
um, I believe the website has that on there. If not, I'll encourage them to make sure that information gets up on the website.
Yeah, you guys have a cool like third party. It's like a lab analysis, and that's pretty cool to see that up there.
Yeah,
Um,
the lab analysis is up there. We probably need to redo some of them, but that's up to the company at this point. So, but yeah, I mean, again, we haven't changed the process, Matt, for 5 years. No, she's 2019, 7 years, and the formula has been identical since my show with Sean Croxton in October of 2012 on Underground Wellness, and early in the early years, I did do a podcast with Justin at Extreme Health
Health Radio.
Radio. I'm one of the earliest ones on there. I forget, I'm in the first 50 of them or so, but he's got over 400 down there, I think now.
Yeah, I got to catch up. No, they're great. They're my favorite other podcasts. And
Good.
so, what's a therapeutic dose? Because I just I feel great, and it's kind of like the more I drink, the better I feel. So, what's like the most? Have you drank like a bag a day?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really defer to hopefully someone is potentially working with a clinician,
Mhm.
acupuncturist, nutritionist, and working with their whole person. But by typical, seem like you're in pretty good health. A cup a day would be fantastic. Ray Pete might say 3 cups a day. I don't know what he says, but it sounds like he does a lot of bone broth and probably makes them himself. Depending on your health conditions, I mean, I'm drinking at least a cup a day right now. My cats get a couple of ounces out of her AIP bone broth, which stands for autoimmune protocol. And that came about through just the need to produce a broth with no onions and no garlic. So people with allergies
Mm.
to onions and garlic, or potentially on a Hashimoto's, or struggling with SIBO, struggling with Lyme's disease. Some of the protocols say try to avoid those. They're what they call oh gosh, I just lost the name of it. Low FODMAPs. So they want
Oh
no
yeah.
FODMAPs. And onions and garlic are FODMAPs. Don't ask me what that means, but but apparently they needed some, so we made it. It's pet friendly, and it's autoimmune protocol, and it's the one I drink because I love it. It's really got a little more chickeny taste to it than the regular chicken. There's absolutely no salt in it, so you must add salt to make it taste good. But it certainly is delicious bone broth, and always super gelatinous. So good stuff there. Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's see. What's the difference between beef and chicken broth mainly? Because I feel
Great
really good
question.
on beef, but
Yeah, again,
yeah.
so there you go. You have it really good on the beef. The beef has a different diet. So again, we talked about you are what you eat. You are what the animal eats. The animal eats grass for 28 months, over 2 years, to get those cattle to market, eating grass alone. So you're only
Mm.
going to get that. So for some people, for instance, in the breast cancer arena, they may avoid our broth because it's made with chickens that are eating corn and soy. And soy has estrogens that could raise your estrogen level. And although we found very good success with our chicken broth with most people, a great percentage of them. So the difference is basically the diet of the animal. The health benefits are generally the same. The beef, I would say, tends to have a slightly higher collagen content because of the bones are bigger, they're older. There's more developed cartilage in there. I'm like feeling my knee right now. I'm running my hand around my knee, going, "Yeah, there's more cartilage and joints in there." So that you have that a little bit different. And again, with collagen, you have type 1, type 2, type 3. With the beef broth and the chicken broth, we use a variety of bones from the animal. So the chicken, we use the feet, the neck, the back, the wingtips, and the carcass, which is pretty much all the bones. The only bones we don't use are chicken leg bones and chicken thigh bones, because those get sent out in those pieces that they cut. And in the beef, we use a soup mix as well, so not just straight femurs, which again technically may or may not have a lot of collagen in them. Those are the two bones that you eat the gelatin, the marrow out of. But we use mostly the knees, and they sell those pretty regularly for a high price. So they don't typically put them in the bone broth mix. But all the bones, of course, are filled with marrow, which is another thing we should mention. Bone
Mhm.
marrow, as my good friend Krista Recchio says. It's a marrow, blood elixir, because it's literally liquid bone marrow, and that marrow is the building blocks of your blood, and so it helps you to support that part of your system. So that's a little bit of the difference between beef and chicken. And then, of course, the marrow is coming out of the chicken bones as well as the beef bones. And literally, when we're done with both of those products, it's the beef bones are the main bones are there, but everything else is pretty much gone to mush, liquid. So it's been basically liquid bone at that point. And that's why you can drink it. You're basically drinking bone, and that's why the ancient cultures simmered it to get the nutrients out of it, especially the marrow.
I love it. Yeah, and that I think a lot of people that haven't been into farming, they don't get that you can't have 100% pasture raised chicken. I mean, they need supplemental feed in the winter or at certain times. I mean, they're not going to eat bugs 100% of the time, even if it's
Absolutely.
10%. Yeah.
It's another quick sleight of hand marketing trick that they're using. They're trying to, you know, they've even seen websites where they pull out this picture of, a person picking carrots from the garden and the chicken running around the background. Bullshit. Bullshit. First of all, they're getting fed feed. And I tell you right now, you're right in your own backyard. You have Primal Pastures. Farmer Paul Grieve over there, and you have his two companies. You have Pasture Bird and Primal Pastures. You could visit that farm and see what the husbandry is. They use feed to bring their chickens to market. Everybody uses feed to bring their chickens to market. Mary's has a heritage brand of chicken that's David Pittman once told me they were producing about 1,000 a week, maybe 1,000 a day. But that's compared to the 100,000 a week they're doing. So they're literally 1% of their crop is pasture raised, and
Mm.
they are producing that chicken in if a chicken's normal life takes 65 days to bring it to market. About 48 to 54 days to bring them to market. A pasture raised chicken might come to market in 64 to 68 days.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
Huh.
I think I learned that at the farm. But again, if you're talking about grandma's chicken, and again, if you go buy a pasture raised chicken online, it's $30, and most of the pasture raised chickens are sold whole because no one's going to cut them up. And what are you going to do? Spend $40 for a chicken breast? You're
Right.
just not going to. So they sell them whole, and then of course, yeah, save those bones if you do get them and make your own broth. But let's so the pasture raised thing, we do no holes barred. You can buy grass fed, grass finished beef bones. You can get them from foreign countries now. Australia has a big grass fed market here now. New Zealand, I'm not sure how much that's coming into the country, but we get ours locally, grown in California. So,
I,
and some of them are even raised on Palmer Mountain, from what I was told.
I love
So,
it.
they're grass fed, grass finished, certified organic. A big thing. Those are absolutely 100% no grains ever, and no hormones, no antibiotics. GAP, Global Animal Welfare Program, level 4 and higher for the beef. Chicken is Global Animal Welfare Program level 3 and higher as well. So that's for us. So anyway, do you want to talk about how to make bone broth?
Let's
It's up
do
to
it.
you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on marrow for a second.
Sure.
Have you experimented with just eating that straight for a while? Because the desiccated caps are really easy to take, and I do that with liver. But are you a fan of just eating marrow straight?
When I was working a lot in the kitchen, I used to definitely sneak a little marrow out of the beef bones, but it's very high fat. I mean, you got to have a
Mm.
palate for fat. It's contained in the fat. The marrow is this big chunk of fat in there. So if you're not so heavy about that, I think like liver and things like that, people can get a really great desiccated liver product to get that component into their diets. Not too many people, no matter how good it is for you, are going to do that. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I think if you had an opportunity to eat some bone marrow, again, just make sure it's from a grass-fed, grass-finished cow. Don't be eating the ossobuco, your local, your veal ossobuco from the local Italian restaurant. As good as it probably tastes, I mean, unless you just know, okay, well, say a little prayer, get a little Ayurveda over there, and say, this will be good for me, and enjoy it. fuck, just enjoy it at that point and say, hell, the hell with it. I'm gonna throw out my religious beliefs. I'm gonna throw out my political beliefs. I'm gonna eat this fucking piece of veal. Not me.
Uh,
And I don't
yeah.
really do much pork either. I do bacon, Sunday organic bacon once in a while. My son loves it, so we used to eat way more of it, but we don't eat much pork anymore because you just can't get good raised pork. And
Yeah.
even
I'm
when you
with you.
can, there's a whole thing on pork, and
Mhm.
I don't know. Just feel out your own thing. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. I don't.
Yeah.
For me,
I'm
it's
with you.
not something I eat too much of.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And what's interesting is Raby talks about unsaturated fats and how cows actually have an ability to detoxify those, but a
Mm,
chicken, since because the chickens aren't a ruminant animal, they don't. So the polyunsaturated fatty acids that oxidize in us go right into the tissues. But I'm just curious if that ends up in the chicken bones because I believe that chicken broth is a lot healthier than the chicken meat. But
yeah,
just some,
potentially it is. I mean, we love chicken skin.
yeah.
We don't eat it. We're not eating it that much. So again, when you want to indulge in things, just do it moderately and
Mhm,
and not to excess, and just
mhm,
ask it to be good for you and test, see how you feel.
yeah.
But yeah, we sell chicken. We did have our fat analyzed. We offer beef and chicken fat on the website. I don't know if you knew that,
Mm.
but we do offer tallow, which is
Oh,
basically
cool.
rendered. It's rendered when we roast the beef bones. We render the fat, place the fat into the we just cool it, place it in containers when it's cool, and sell it frozen. It's really good. The chicken fat definitely has an omega structure that's upside down. But again, if
Mm,
it's not your main source of fat, then you don't need to worry about it. I eat plenty of salmon to get omega.
mhm,
Like the omega 6 is higher than the omega 3s or
mm,
something like
mm,
this.
mhm.
So again, the broths themselves are very low fat because we literally have to skim all the fat off the packet to make it the mouthfeel. That's why there's no fat in our broth. So
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue on how do you make broth because we spoke on the phone. I'm doing bison bones and experimenting with that. But one day I had this layer of fat that was like 2 or 3 inches thick, and I thought heck, it's probably good for me, and I drank it, and my stomach was so upset for for like 1 to 2 hours after that. I guess it
well,
was
that
just too much.
yeah, too much. Yeah, we actually just made some homemade broth recently too. And when you first pull it off, it's definitely a mouth feel and stomach feel thing with the fat. So
Yeah.
again, so we're going to talk a little bit. So we'll set the basics here. Any broth we're gonna assume it's organic, grass fed, grass finished beef. We're gonna assume it's pasture raised, potentially, or at least free range, certified organic chicken, which is more likely what you're going to find. We're going to use bones. We're going to try to use all the bones. If we use a whole chicken, we're going to try to harvest the meat. So we would put a whole chicken in the pot, and about an hour to 80 minutes later, you're going to pull the chicken out and pull the meat off the bone to use the meat for eating, and then you would continue to simmer the bones. I like a traditional bone broth, so we use carrots, celery, onions. In our formula, we have ginger and lemon, and we don't use much salt, but if you're making it at home, you can add your own salt to it. We use bay leaves, parsley stems at the end, fresh thyme at the end, and the acidic component, which is either a combination of lemon juice and or apple cider vinegar. So that helps to draw the simmer out of the help to draw the minerals out of the bones. Apparently,
Mhm.
according to the Weston A. Price Foundation and Sally Fallon, although we found out after we tested the broth that they weren't high in calcium. However, the last thing I'll say is, we do ours commercially 18 hours to 24 hours. I was very successful with the broth at 12 hours the other day because my wife just does not like the smell of broth in the house overnight. So I started it at 6 in the morning. I pulled it off at 6 at night, and a 12-hour broth came out beautiful. So we go, my husband doesn't like the smell of it. Well, don't simmer for 24, 36 hours. I think 12 to 18 hours, 10 hours, whatever you can get is sufficient. We picked 18 because it's very economical. It's much more expensive to produce broth at 24. And again, buyer beware, we produce our broth for 24 to 48 hours. No fucking way. 48 hours at a co-packer, which is most of the companies don't even do their own manufacturing. It's just too long. I tried calling all these companies. I said, you want to leave it in the kettle for how long? Can you do it in 6 hours? I mean, we got other products to make. You know how much it would cost us to make it if we took up our kettles for 24 hours? And so I could tell you more about the about how they make those nasty boxes of broth, but I won't. If you want to email me, it's theflavorchef@gmail. If you hear this and you're at the very end of the podcast, but yeah, that's how you make bone broth. And of course, there's a million YouTube videos on it out there.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for that. And yeah, I've been experimenting with an instant pot as we spoke about, but I don't think that's the ideal way to do it. I think I used to use like a crock pot,
Yeah.
just electric plug in. That worked really well.
Yeah, again,
Um,
it's the slow cooker method to us is just low and slow. That's the way we
mhm,
like to do it. That's where we get the most mineral extraction. The crock pots are great. Just make sure they're made of good material. I don't know much to comment on the Instapot or a pressure cooker method, except that be careful with the high heat. Short cook times can develop into some other things that you may or may not be comfortable with in your body. But I've talked to people who say they make great broth and they love it. And I said, great, have at it. I know for me, if it gets too much glutamate, I'll get a headache because I'm sensitive to glutamate. So, and that's could be a byproduct of high heat bone broth. But yeah, so use good materials, stainless steel pot if you got one. 8 to 12 quarts is a nice. We had an 8 quart pot, and I told my wife I'm going to get a 12 quart pot because if I make it at home, because 8 quarts only yielded 2 quarts of broth. So on the yield as well, no matter what you yield, it's going to be good for you because you spent the time and energy and love to make it. You chose good animals, you used good water, you used certified organic vegetables, you did a low, slow simmer. Okay, so the broth didn't gel. All right, well, it's just like anything. You just have less gelatin in the broth. Maybe you need to drink a little bit more. And next time, either you need to use less water or add a little more bones. That's just basically the key right there. Or if it's too high temperature, it could break the gelatin down as well.
mhm,
So you might want to pull back a little bit on the temp and just keep it a very low, slow gurgle. I recommend Nourishing Broth by
mhm,
Kayla Daniel and Sally Fallon as a book on bone broth, but The Bone Broth Secret by the former Louise Hay and her partner Heather Dane is a great book, and I've been on there. I was on Heather's radio show a couple years ago, and of course Dr. Kellyanne's written a great book called The Bone Broth Diet and Bone Broth. Dr. Kellyanne Petrucci, she's got some nice material. Now she sells other products other than bone broth, but she's got to make money or she wants to make more money. I'm friends with her, so she's cool.
mhm. I love it.
She loves bone broth too. She loves my bone broth as well. She doesn't say it too publicly because she has her own product, but she loves our product, bar none.
Very cool. And you might have touched on it, and I think it's even on your website. But my friend asked, "Are there superior parts? Or which parts of the animal are best for making bone broth? Like if it's like a cow, like knuckle."
Yeah, the knuckle bones.
Mhm,
Knuckle bones for sure. We use what they call a soup mix. You can generally
mhm,
get that from your butcher if you have a good grass fed source from it. It's going to include shoulder, clavicles, hip bones, maybe some femur. Again, the femurs
mhm,
generally get sold for marrow bones for people
mhm,
to simmer and eat the marrow out of. You might get some ankles and some knees, different joint bones. So, yeah, all the different joints that are there and that's what's really good for beef bones or bison, either one, any four-legged animal like that. So
Okay, awesome. And then how often and how much? You said a cup a day. I feel good on 2 cups. I usually like do a cup in the morning, cup at night, but it's individual, right?
yeah,
Just
it's
kind of.
individual, and the cup at night is fantastic because you think about that's when your body goes into repair mode. So the last thing you're putting in is a nice cup of bone broth. It kind of settles you down a little bit, gets you ready for sleeping. I think there is some tryptophan components in there potentially that might help you to lay down a little bit. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that one, but I know it feels good.
Yeah.
As I like to say, it's really important when you hand someone a cup of broth if they're informed that you're not handing them a cup of powder and water. You're handing them a cup of bone broth, food that you made, and they feel it. I mean, we've heard this from hundreds of people over the years. So
I love it. And last curious question for me, I've heard ice cube trays, and I never really resonated with that because it's plastic, but people say, "Oh, pour your bone broth into ice cube trays and keep them frozen and then just defrost one cube at a time." But
it's a 2 ounce tray. Truthfully, I got to tell you, we have an ice cube tray. We don't put it in hot. Uh,
yeah.
we pull them out when they're frozen so we can reuse the ice cube tray. But my son
Mhm.
does not like hot bone broth. So we put a beef cube in his, and he loves the beef. He's
Oh,
9
cool.
years old. I've got a picture of him when he was a baby. taking in the broth right out of the gelatin, right out of the jar, eating with his fingers and just slopping it on his face. And he's got quite a constitution. He doesn't get sick, and he's still we love our broth. So we recommend as much as you can drink. Again, you can't overdo it because it's food.
I love it. Well, Lance, I really appreciate you coming on, and
Great call.
I love your balanced approach and your philosophy, and it's
Sure.
in alignment with mine. So,
And
um,
yeah, Matt 10. Don't
oh
forget.
yeah, yeah. And if people use the discount code MAT10, they could save 10%, right, on your website. So
10% at bonebroth.com using Matt 10, and you'll have your link up in the notes. The show will come out
yeah,
when it does, and we look forward to hearing from anyone. You can reach me, theflavorchef@gmail.com. If you have any personal questions, if you're in Southern California, you want to get together, hook me up. Take a jump in the cold ocean. Hopefully be
yeah.
warm. Hopefully be warm by then.
There you have it, bone broth. Hope all your questions about it were answered in this episode. And big takeaway, avoid the boxed bone broth products because you're not going to get really any benefit from those. But something that's frozen, like the Flavor Chef, it's fresh, all the nutrients are intact, it's 24 hours simmered on low temperature, and everything is organic. It's just top quality. I personally go through, on average, 1 bag a day. And if you use my discount code MAT10, I'll put a link below, it comes out to about $12.50 per bag, which is very affordable. And if you order enough at a time, anything over $135, you actually get free shipping. So this is a pretty affordable, easy way to get it in. Lance also went into how to make it at home, and that's always best, especially if you can get really good grass-fed local bones, maybe from a farmer or a butcher. But if you don't have time, you're really busy, maybe you're dealing with an illness and you need something that's just very fast, I mean, this is the easiest way to get in high quality gelatin. And again, this is way beyond just supplementing gelatin powder or collagen powder. Although those can be beneficial, liquid form and in its most natural form is always the best. So I'll put a link below to where you can order my favorite, the beef bone broth. The chicken's good as well. Or you can just head over to bonebroth.com and then use the discount code MAT10 to save a little bit. And as always, you can go to my website, matt-blackburn.com, to check out all of my recommended products. Today's quote is by Dr. Ray Peat. Gelatin and glycine have recently been reported to facilitate the action of insulin in lowering blood sugar and alleviating diabetes. Gelatin has been used successfully to treat diabetes for over 100 years. Glycine inhibits lipolysis, another anti-excitatory, anti-estrogenic effect, and this in itself will make insulin more effective and help to prevent hyperglycemia. Since persistent lipolysis and insulin resistance, along with a generalized inflammatory state, are involved in a great variety of diseases, especially in the degenerative diseases, it's reasonable to consider using glycine or gelatin for almost any chronic problem.